everybody, Chris Brandley here with Chris Brandley Art. For those of you that don't know me, I have been a professional artist for many years. I love to teach. I teach online courses. I teach in Italy and France and do workshops locally and in Florida. And I have been doing these live painting demos every Tuesday this summer. So we're gonna do another one today. I'm glad you guys are here. Please feel free to jump in and say hello. Would love to know where you're from. And also in the comments below, tell me if you are a dog or a cat person, or maybe a horse person or a donkey person. If you have a pet, tell me their name and what they are. I've got a little Yorkie poo named Tibby, so you may hear her during the live video. Sometimes she tries to scratch on the door behind me. This is her way to the backyard, so you may be hearing some of that. But anyway, it's all fun. It's just a relaxed environment, so would love for you guys to jump in and say hi, and just tell me where you're from, if you're an artist or just an art lover, whatever the case may be. So I am going to paint daisies today. So originally I was going to paint a rooster. And you know, sometimes you just don't feel it. Like I had it planned yesterday and I just wasn't feeling it. And my daughter, she's been doing this musical. So let's see, it's going on for 2 weeks, I think. It's Seussical. And then the week before the production actually started, they did a kids camp and they were teaching the kids just a junior version of the musical. And one of her little girls gave her some daisies. I thought it was so cute. And so I am gonna paint those today instead. I would love it if you would share. Just hit that share button. It won't take you off the video or anything. And that way other people can find these live videos and it helps me out as well. So those of you that are sharing all the time, I so appreciate that. Sometimes I forget to mention it. But what I've done is I have put my underpainting on already. And so I've kind of established where I want my shadows and where I want my highlights. And I just love the backlighting in these little daisies. And so that's what I'm gonna try to capture. And I don't always use the same colors underneath, but I know kind of how colors are going to interact with each other. And I am working in oils. This can also be done in acrylics. It is an alla prima method. That means just working wet into wet. So my undercoat is wet. Hi Donnie, how are you doing today? So I'm going to do something a little bit differently here. I've been having trouble. I've been using another iPad to answer your questions, but the questions keep disappearing. So we're going to try here on my desktop. I've got it next to me. So hopefully that'll work a little bit better. So bear with me here for just a second while I make sure that I can see. There we go. All right. So hopefully I'll be able to see your questions from there. And please feel free to ask any questions that you have along the way, or if you just want to comment anything. Again, if you have a pet, tell me what kind of pet you have and what their name is, and I would love to get to know you. All right, so now I'm going to come in with thicker paint. My first layer I used a medium and I kind of thinned everything down. So now we're going to start building in the textures. And I'm going to jump in here where these shadows are. So I want to make sure, if I were to just come in with my whites and do whites and grays on just a white canvas, it's not going to pop those whites out very well. And really there's no like whites in here. There's warm whites and then there's cool whites or grays. So I just like to kind of bump up those colors and just have fun with it. All right, so I'm gonna mix up some cooler whites here to begin with. and it takes me a minute to get them mixed. I always like to make sure they're really thoroughly mixed. Hi, Michelle. She says hi from Nebraska. I actually have relatives in Nebraska. That's where my dad grew up, and my grandparents lived there. They're no longer with us, but my aunt and uncle live there. So going in kind of with some darker, cooler whites to begin with. And I'm just going to start laying in little bits here and there. Just finding some of the darker values. And I like to kind of change those up a bit as I work. So down in through here, they're a little darker, a little cooler. Let's see, I'm looking at the shapes of those petals, kind of wanting to capture, putting in where those darker shadows are on some of these petals to begin with. So how is everybody's summer going? We started off having such a nice summer. July was unusually cooler than it normally is, but that has now changed. We are now in the hundreds. And my husband and I, Tyler and I, went shopping yesterday, and just, it was sweltering. Just unbearable to even be out. Michelle says, fun to see your underpainting. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I like to see kind of how other artists' brains work and see what their choices are. You know, that's one thing I love about my workshops is a lot of times if I'm doing a demo for a certain subject, it's so fun to see how different everybody's come out. That's our individual DNA at work. I love it. Just trying to get those darker values in first. And then we'll come in and start putting in some other fun colors. I think I might kind of move over to some of these other flowers. So I'm just focusing on these three. I'm not going to worry about all of these other little petals peeking in. Just using my artistic license and kind of making some decisions that will kind of help the composition, I think. Sometimes, especially if you have a big bouquet of flowers and some of them are just coming off the edges and they don't always create the best composition. So you kind of have to think about how you want to direct the viewer's eye. And I don't necessarily want to bring the eye to the edge as much. So we're just going to focus on these other florals, or these three here in the middle. So I know some of you out there have pets. Don't be shy. Tell me what you got, what their name is. Or if you just want to sit and relax and watch, that's okay too. So I'm just kind of finding my way through my darker values. That will help whenever I start laying those lighter whites in. It's going to help to pop those much more. So I'm actually in the process of planning another local workshop that's gonna be held in November. Don't want to give any details yet because we're still kind of finalizing things, but I will definitely let y'all know when that comes out. Also, if you sign up for my newsletter, that's really the best way to find out about all of my events, whether they're shows, retreats, workshops. I love these blues in here up against these other colors, and then when we pop those whites in, just such a pretty color combination. Let's see, Michelle is asking, do you see, or do you ever have, oh wait, no, it just skipped. Do you see those underpainting colors in the whiteness of those daisies? Somewhat. Obviously, I've punched them up a lot more than reality, and sometimes I'll saturate. I didn't saturate this photo, but sometimes I will, and it helps me to see some of those undertones. But I know that these cooler whites in here are leaning cooler, but I'm also seeing some pinks in there. And that's just something, I know not everybody can see as many colors, and I truly believe it just takes some training of your eye. If you just really start paying attention to details, especially in nature and just how light affects certain objects and how the shadows are, I think that will really train your eye. It's just like, you know, working your muscles, working out is just something you have to practice. But a lot of times I'll use artistic license and just kind of do what I want. So there's that too. Good question though. Let's see, Michelle's asking, do you ever have a workshop in France? I do. I have done workshops in France, and I've got one next summer that's actually almost full already, but I do have, I think, 4 rooms left. So that has gone kind of fast. But yeah, just check on my website under workshops and you can pull that up. All right, just gonna put a few more little shadows in here and then we'll start building some other colors. Get to those. So we're in France. So it's in southwest France in the Pyrenees. It is Grand Brassic is the name of the town. So it's a very obscure little town and it's in a castle. And the castle is owned by Miles Copeland. I don't know, those of you that are music moguls might know who he is, but he was the manager of Sting and the Police and the Go-Go's, a lot of bands back in the 80s. And he owns a castle and he does songwriter retreats there. And then recently he started doing artist retreats. So that is where we're going next June. This has been one that we have been planning since 2019. And we were supposed to go in 2020. And of course that didn't happen. And then we were supposed to go this summer. And we had to cancel because we just wasn't quite ready. France wasn't open. So anyway, third time's a charm, right? Okay, I think before I go in and start putting in midtones and highlights, I'm gonna skip around just a little bit. I'm gonna go into this daisy pod. And I think, let's see, I'm gonna start with some of the orange tones, orangey yellow tones. So we'll do that first, kind of build it up. And I think I'm gonna pop a little green in there. Especially down here around the front. It kind of has a green tint to it. And then we get lighter as we come closer to the top. That wasn't quite as light as I wanted. And I kind of like to just bounce around on the board a little bit. I don't want to focus too long on detailing an area too quickly. So bringing all these other colors in, that really helps me later with the values and just making sure my colors are working with each other. And I'm not just spending a whole lot of time putting detail in only to find out later that either the values or colors aren't working. So. All right, let's jump in to some of those mid-tones. So I'm gonna put in, I've got some really warm whites and I've got some cooler whites. So I'm gonna go with my cooler whites here first. Michelle is asking if I can tell you what colors I am mixing roughly. So I'm using kind of a green, like a cool green and a white to get some of these cooler whites. And I'm looking to see where some of those mid-tones are, right through here. And it helps to kind of test those out. And I think that's gonna work just fine. Yeah, and just so everybody knows, these are a little bit different from my paid workshops. So in my workshops, I am very thorough and I tell everybody exactly what colors I'm using, how to mix them. You'll see a camera on both my surface and my palette. I tell you all the brands of colors, lots and lots of detail. I'm very thorough. But with these free lives, it's just kind of, I'm just painting while you guys hang out with me. I don't mind if you want to try the painting out yourself. If you post it, I do appreciate tagging me and just putting hashtag Chris Brandley Art. Just something to know that this was a lesson. It wasn't, you know, it's important for people to know when it's something that's been done originally by you, or if it was done under instruction or copied. So all my paintings are copyrighted. Let me just put it that way. But I do love to help other artists, and it's a huge passion of mine. So just kind of working around some of those lower cools. One little brush mark at a time. Hey Jessica, she says you are very good at explaining every step you do, very thorough. Thank you. Jessica she's been in 2 of my online courses. She was in Essence of Italy, which is I think it was a 9-week course. So it's not open right now, but we will probably be opening it up again. And she is currently taking my online lessons. So I have online monthly lessons, and it's open to sign up anytime, and you just start with that month, and you can either go for month to month, or you can pay for the year and get a little bit of a discount. And the first month is free too. I don't know how long we're going to be doing that, but as of now, that's what we're doing. So there's lots of goodies in there, lots of bonus material. Every month, it's not just one demo. There are exercises, there's videos, there's PDF, like tips, studio setup, all kinds of stuff. Lots and lots of information. And it's only $29 a month, so, or $310 for the year if you sign up for the whole year. So there's pops of highlights back there. Some of them are actually warmer and some are cooler. So I'm really paying attention to my temperatures, because that just makes such a big difference in the painting if you can have your temperatures kind of play off of each other. I have details about temperature and color wheel, color mixing, all that kind of fun stuff in my course. Some of this flower in the back is pretty bright. So I'm going to hold off on those brightest highlights until the end or until later. Even down through here, they're a little bit brighter than some of the ones I'm seeing down here. Not all of them, but just trying to pay close attention. Yep, that picked up some magenta or something underneath there. I need to fix that. And actually this green color that I'm using, I picked this one up in Italy. It's a Mamari, what's it called? Mamari Puro. And I do believe, I think it's Jerry's Artarama that sells that brand. But I love the paints. Let's see, where was I going with this? We want to fill in some of these shadows down here that are not quite as dark. Nope, I want to go a little darker. Actually, I'm going to pull in a little more blue. A little different blue than I was using. A little warmer. But that's got some really strong pigmented color in those Maimeri Puros. It's spelled M-A-I-M-E-R-I in case you are curious. You can see how having those undercolors on there, sometimes I'm wanting to actually pull those into my top coat or my top painting, top strokes, like I did there. So that kind of cooled that down a little bit. So it's a lot of fun to work this way, I think. And just let some of those little bits of color show from underneath. It just really adds a lot of vibrancy to the painting, I think. And again, I'm using some artistic license. I'm not doing it exactly as I see it in the photo, which is kind of nice. I mean, it's important to pay attention to values and how the light works with each of these colors and petals. But it's a very organic piece, and so that gives you a lot of freedom to be expressive. So Jessica says, yes, I think I have seen that brand of paint at Jerry's. I live 2 miles from this store. Oh, you are in Austin, right? I think I did hear that there was a store there. I am gonna have to go and visit, and it's probably be hard to get me out because we don't have one up here in the Dallas area that I know of. I'm always having to order. All right, so there's more that I can do with that color, but let's see, we still have 30 minutes, so that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and punch in some of these highlights just so you can see the difference it makes when you start bumping up those values and really capturing that light. It's my favorite part. So I'm actually using a warmer white now. And so I'm not gonna get the lightest highlights yet, but I'm gonna start laying in these warmer whites back in here. And I'm okay with that, picking up some of that pink. I think it just adds so much. Just letting your colors kind of do their thing. Let's see, up in here, I want to make sure that's really bright. So I'm going to make sure my brush is clean. And it's kind of fun to go back and forth with different shades of white. So like this is a kind of a warmer yellowy white, but then also it's fun to put in pinkish whites. And then obviously the cooler whites. So down and through here, that's pretty light. Really want to capture those little streaks of light back there. I just think it adds so much. Jessica says, yes, I'm in Austin. I'm broke because of living so close to Jerry's. I can imagine. She says it's too much fun there. Yeah, that would not be a good thing for me. All right, let's hop over here and put some of these in. And really, this is where I want my main focus to be, on that flower. So I probably will detail that one a little bit more and maybe come back in here, maybe blur these and push them back a little bit later. So I usually save that step until last. I start going back and kind of refining and blending a little bit more. Right now I'm just kind of laying in strokes, building my colors up slowly in values. And some of these I'll come back whenever I start putting in colors in my background, my top colors, I'll come back and rework some of these edges just so that they kind of get pushed back, because I don't want all my edges on everything to be crisp. And a lot of times where these big jumps are between lights and darks, I'll come and kind of soften those. Kind of blend those in a little bit more. But again, I try to hold back and just lay my colors in. My students always hear me say, lay it and leave it, because you're going to be tempted to overblend. And if you're wanting it to be impressionistic, we all know that overblending kind of takes away from that. So you want those colors to be loose, or those brush strokes, I'm sorry, to be nice and loose. So you got to kind of keep it loose through the whole process. And you can always come back and refine later. Nice bright stroke in there. And that was my little Yorkie poo. I don't know if you guys heard her, but she's got a very high-pitched bark. And she can be extremely loud for such a little one. Seems like the little ones are the highest pitched and the loudest, right? All right, I am going to come down here and put some of these stems in and get some of this greenery in. That's going to make a big difference. All right, let's see here. I want to go fairly dark again because we're getting that backlighting. So I want my edges to be a little bit lighter and then the center to be darker. So I'm going to start with kind of the center. And I'm going to start fairly dark. Get those nice dark values in, and then we'll build from there. And I don't want to cover up everything because I like these little bits of orange peeking out. Let's see, now I've got this color here, so I'm just kind of looking around to see little places that we can pop in. Maybe some background leaves or whatnot. I don't want this to be too detailed back here. I want it to be much more abstract, much softer. Okay, now I'm gonna go to a mid-tone, and most of these stems are kind of cool sagey greens, so I don't want it to get too warm. Still being careful not to cover up all those pretty highlights that are already naturally starting to form. Let's see, we've got another one hiding back here. And there's a little of this color kind of up here on, coming through the top of this. Little bits of differentiation in there. Okay, looking in the center here, we've got some green tones in there as well. Those are warmer. So I'm gonna go in with a warmer green. And I kind of want to keep these dark areas down here fairly dark. As a matter of fact, let me emphasize that first. So I'm going to come in with that darker green that we were using here, but I'm adding in purple to go really super dark. And I don't want to cover up all that nice undertone. See if I can pop these in without taking away from that glow. It just helps to kind of anchor the flower a little bit, the little pod, and give it some depth. All right, now we're going with those warmer greens. Warmer, but I'm still keeping them fairly neutral. I don't want them to be really bright. So anytime you want to dull down your green, you add its complement. So I'm going with a red tone to kind of dull that down just a little bit. I'm just going to pop in a little bit of this, and then we'll build that up. Go a little bit lighter. Actually, I can probably use that color a little bit over in here too. I'll lighten that up just a tad. All right, going much lighter. Nice bright green this time. I just love these kind of limey greens in the daisy. Just looks so summery. There's greens and pinks up against each other. I don't know what it is. Greens, pinks, and oranges, if it's the right tone, just reminds me of my childhood. I think I had a pair of clogs that were hot pink and orange. All right, I'm gonna come back and put in some highlights, like some backlighting, but instead of going warmer, I'm gonna keep the greens cooler and then maybe pop in some warms because sometimes if you're just putting in all cool colors, it's not going to stand out as well. So we'll do that first and kind of see what happens. All right, just deciding on my color tone here. Sometimes it's a process. I have to mix it, test it out, and it's not always right the first time, so. And again, I want to do this without covering up all of those pretty oranges that are in there. Just adding little hints. And I think I can bump that up even more, so we'll do that. But again, just creating some abstract shapes in the background. And I think before I do any more on the stems, I'm going to go ahead and get my background in. And I always like to use a bigger brush. So what I was using before, this one was a 20 Royal Sable Tech by Long Nickel, and it's a bright. And now I'm using a 28. And I just like to have fun with the background. So I don't want it to be too busy back there, but I do want to make it help these daisies really stand out. I'm going to try out a couple of different things here. I'm going to start dark. And again, I'm trying not to be blendy. I'm wanting my strokes to be loose. Just kind of looking for the darker values, and I kind of changed things up a little bit, took some artistic license where I got rid of those other petals in the background, and we're just going in with some color tones back in here, hints of leaves, whatnot. Let's see here. Kind of neutralizing that a little bit by pulling in some green. Okay, we've got some lighter turquoisey colors in there because there's actually a big pot sitting behind these daisies. That's a cobalt blue, which I love. So I do want to pull some of that color in. And I'm out of blue, so I've got to clear off my palette a little bit so I can add some more pure color. So I do like to stick with the same color palette on all of my paintings, and I always put my colors out in the same order every time. So that way it's very easy for me to just use muscle memory and go in and just find my colors. Otherwise, if you're just randomly sticking your colors all over your palette, it's going to be kind of hard to stay in the flow whenever you have to stop and look for those colors. So again, I'm not putting in an actual pot back here, but I am mimicking some of those colors. Let's carry that over. Let's see. And we're going to change those values and temperatures up just a little bit. Keep it exciting. Just kind of using my background also to kind of come in and define some of these petals a little bit more. Kind of helps to break those up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for a bit and just see how we like that. Gonna come back in, and now we're gonna go with another color tone. I do want to have some warms. I like these warms kind of blurred in the background. So maybe some complements in there, some oranges. Don't want it too bright necessarily. Let's just try something out here. And then we'll pull some greens in. And I'm already kind of looking for areas in the end where I can pop in some fun color. I always do that towards the end, just pop in some colors that really make a big difference. And I'm kind of paying attention to that as I paint, thinking about that. Pop in some greens, warmer greens. Don't want to cover up all of the undergreens, the undertones. Just kind of let that work together. pull these two colors together, make more sense out of that. Just little hints of light back there. I think we need a similar color, that orangey tone, down over here on this side as well. Brighten that up just a little bit. So getting that background in kind of helps me be able to gauge what's going on with the flowers a little bit more. So I like to kind of get that on in before I finish up the flowers, and then I can come back and see what needs to be done to the flowers and kind of work the background and the foreground together. All right, I'm gonna go back to my original brush I was using. So that was the 20 Bright. And I'm gonna put in, we talked about some pink toned whites. So I'm gonna do that. Start placing those in, seeing what they look like. Kind of help shape some of these petals a little bit more. I've got about 6 minutes. Anybody have any other questions they wanted to throw out? Well, I certainly appreciate you guys watching. It's always fun to hang out with y'all while I paint. Again, I appreciate any shares. Let's see, I've got some colors in there. I want to really pop in some really light, bright whites. I know I've got these yellowy white tones, but we're gonna pop in our lightest highlight here in a minute. Kind of get these spread throughout a little bit. These pink tones. Hitting in those brightest whites. And I see some little areas too. I want to bring the background down a little bit further into the petal and kind of start pushing some of those colors into each other, softening. So I want to make sure I get some of that done here before we say goodbye. I'm going to pop in a few more of those brighter whites. Oh, I see something else I want to do too. So I see some lemony greens at the very base of this daisy down here that I want to make sure I capture. Those greens really make a big difference, so I don't want to leave those out. A little bit of that down in here. Bit of a highlight. I could probably even pop a little bit of this really light color into that daisy pod. Pull some of that up into the flower a little bit. Nice light. So I just do a little bit and then I'll stop and look at it for a little bit, make sure I don't overdo things, because sometimes if you pick up a color and you put it in, you're like, oh yeah, I love that color. And the next thing you know, you've got that color everywhere and it's not as much of a happy surprise as it could have been if you had just kind of left it. All right, just kind of tying some loose ends together. All right, just a couple of minutes left. So last thing I want to do, like we said, and we'll probably work on this a little bit more afterwards, but I do want to come back in and kind of pull this background in a little closer and just start softening some of these petals. Kind of defining those. I'll define and then soften. I think right in here we need a little more definition. That needs to go lighter. I've got blue in my brush. There we go. Right there and right in through here. I'm going to carry this one up a little higher. Just kind of start refining things, making them make a little more sense in here. I like the pinks in here, but I think it just needs to cool down just a bit. Okay, and I said I was gonna smudge some of those into the background, so let me do that. I gotta make sure my brush is really clean. and really dry. Left a petal out. Just kind of start bringing some of those petals softly into the background. All these up here need a little work. So I'm just going to kind of do this back in here a little bit more abstractly. And come back and soften. Redefining some of those edges a little bit where they might have gotten lost. Starting to pull pieces together. All right, we've gone a little over, so I will probably work on this a little bit more, kind of give it some finishing touches. I'll post it on my Facebook page. If you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to share it and subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on social media.